Hi, Elise. Welcome to the Scenic Route podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, me too. Especially, we have such a loaded topic today. In like productivity as a whole, it's like there is no shortage of like hacks and tools and books and what now advice. And I'm sure we're not gonna do any of those. Or maybe like a little hack, maybe your best one, but
If something comes up, yeah, if
we're
something
going to
comes
the
up, we
root
can do
of the
it.
things and like
Yes.
what it really means. So if you're listening now and you're like tired of like feeling constantly overwhelmed, distracted, or worse, feeling like you're behind in life, or have read that cheesy Pinterest, Instagram quote, you have the same 24 hours as Beyonce
Oh,
too many times, you're in
no.
the right place.
You've got me nailed. You totally, you totally have me down. Like, oh my gosh, you totally get me.
So I think before we dive in, we need to kind of like talk about productivity, like what we mean, or what do you mean? Like, can you explain how you define productivity? What do you mean
Yeah.
when people come to you and they're like, "Oh, I need to be more productive."
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times when they're doing that, thinking like, I need to get more done, with the
Mm,
time that I have. And like you said, the Beyonce meme is like so true. I think that captures the cultural like zeitgeist of productivity in general. And I think that if we were to, somebody was talking about like Venn diagrams and how sometimes it's just overlapping circles. I mean, like completely, oh, it's just one circle sometimes. And I think that's what's dangerous about the word productivity is that I think it kind of overlaps with hustle culture, like the word
mm,
itself and how people have talked about it in the past, that it's about getting more done. And I even used to use that phrase get more done. But what I meant was, and it took me a while to realize it, get more of what matters done. And that there's a
mm,
difference between just getting more done and thinking about what really matters to me and how can I make progress on those things with the time that I actually have. Like being
mm,
realistic about the time I have and the energy I have during those times, the times that are available to me. Right. So the definition I use in all the work that I do with folks is that productivity is making progress in what matters most to you while still
mm,
remaining present to the people, experiences, and opportunities that are all around you. Because with that hustle culture mentality, with the let's just get more stuff done mentality, all of that, we can be going after some really amazing goals, but also lose touch with like the joy of our life or with the relationships that matter personally and professionally.
yeah.
And we can kind of be so nose to the grindstone that we're also missing opportunities that might want to act on. And so
Mm,
it's really kind of breaking out of that old mold and making a shift to saying, okay, but what matters most to me? And pausing to reflect on that from time to
mm.
time so that you can use your time in a way that makes you feel good at the end of the day, and even if I dare say, like, at the end of your life.
Yeah, I love how you reframed it to like it's progress.
Yes.
It's ugh, because yeah, you understand me when you said like we gotta have the fun in it because like yeah, I don't know if it's the double Gemini in my zodiac or if it's the Enneagram 7 or whatever. Like if it ain't fun, I'm out. Like I
Mhm.
can't. Like I'm at this point where I'm like no. Mm-mm. So and you're so right. There's such a toxic. We have such reached such a toxic level of productivity and hustle culture, and whenever we're not living up to the expectations we set ourselves or that have been set for us, there's such a big amount of shame that
Mhm.
comes with it. I'm like, I see it. I mean, I experienced this myself and I see it in my clients. So sometimes it comes up of like, oh, but I should be further ahead,
Mhm.
or why can I not get this done? Or just kind of like all so much shame and guilt around those topics. And I'm like, this is not gonna get us anywhere.
Well, and
So
and I think that that shame and guilt, it's bred into us, or not bred into us, it's nurtured into us, I guess you could say if that's the right word,
mm,
in all of our upbringings. Like I was born and raised in the US as a seemingly white woman. I'm actually half Mexican, but I pass,
You're
if
white
you
passing.
will. Yeah, I'm white passing. I'm also straight passing. I was married to a man for a long time. I'm now married to a woman. So I've shaken all sorts of things up, um, even with that, with all the passing I'm able to do, those expectations are there, right? Of all these boxes we're supposed to check all throughout our lives. And of course it can all be stated with like, the Pinterest perfect moms out there, or the ones who feel like they have to be Pinterest perfect and all that kind of stuff. Um, and so there's that infiltrates like what we think we're supposed to care about.
Mm,
And then there's also just the lack of reality that we have, and me included, I have to work on this all the time about how much time we actually have and the energy we have in that time.
mm.
So we're edging very close to like a tactic here, but and not a tip, but a tactic. But like when people really start looking at the reality of their time,
Yeah.
they start to realize there's no way they could get everything done that they have on their list. And so when people have that, can whip out that Beyonce meme, is like, we all have the same 24 hours and look how much this person's doing. Oh my gosh, there's so much privilege in some of those things, right?
Oh,
There's
for
so many
sure. I mean, she has
like
a private
intersect
chef and whatever there
yeah.
is to support
There's
her.
so many things that intersect with that. And so it's really about like how much time though do you have? How much time do you have? And what matters most in that time? Because are you working full time and raising kids and taking care of pets and parents and all that kind of stuff? And even if you're not, even if you're, heaven forbid, a childless cat mom, as everybody seems to be talking about right
Oh,
now,
the cat
heaven
cat,
forbid. Yeah.
heaven forbid. Like, shame on you. God,
How
shame
dare
events,
you?
the worst. Yes. Okay,
How dare
sidebar.
you not have children and stuff, whatever. But like it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. It's like how much time and energy do you really have and how are you going to use it? You
Mm,
get to decide that.
mm. I think it's also so wonderful that you highlight the energy part again and again, right? Because we all know, at least when we were kids, time used to fly by when we were having fun and still does.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like
Uh-huh.
Einstein, time is relative, whatever. I'm not a physicist, but but like it's so true, right? And this whole mumbo jumbo of like time bending and quantum leaping and shit that you read, right? It's basically just if you're having fun, you time you're more productive, time flies, you get more you get more done too, as when you're like, oh, I have to do this, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just really interesting how, yeah, how that can be shaped, right? And
Yeah.
it's, you said before as well, okay, how you have to figure out it's not really just about getting more things done and just kind of like crossing random shit off your to-do list, but things that matter most to
Yeah.
you. So how can people get clarity on their true priorities?
Yeah. I am someone who had to work at this, which is of course why I work with people on it, right? Like I feel like we take care of our own stuff and like, oh, I can help other people with that now. Like I
Yeah,
have figured that
been
out and
there, done
luckily I
that.
have. Yeah. And so I was the queen of checking things off a list as like that was almost my version of numbing out, right? Like
Oh,
people,
interesting.
yeah, I was like, oh, quote unquote productivity, like that kind of productivity was like, that was like my numb out mode. Like, oh, I got a bunch of
Oh,
stuff done, but that didn't mean that it mattered. So I was like, I got a bunch of stuff done, but I didn't feel any better. To me, it was like, it was almost like artificial sugar. Like if you're going to have sugar, just have sugar, unless of course you've got health issues, but like go for the real sugar, at least. Like don't go for
yeah.
like the
I
the
mean, it
light
signals
version
the
or
same shit
whatever.
into your brain anyway, so might as well get
Yeah.
the real
Might
thing.
as might as well get the good stuff and cut the chemicals, right? But I was like getting like this fake high in a quick,
Quick dopamine
not
hit of like cross,
yeah,
cross,
check, check,
cross.
check. But it was like
Oh.
stuff that I didn't care about. It was stuff for other people. It didn't include like what I wanted and what was for me. So I had all these systems in place, but I didn't actually look at like what was on my to-do list. Like what is really there? And do I really care about those things? And so to some extent, having like tools and systems in place is really helpful because it puts everything in front of you that you've agreed to and that you think you want, right? So it's like it's getting it all just in one place. So
Mm.
I'm always like, just get it all in one place. Like don't let it be scattered everywhere. Get it all in one place because when you get it in one place, you can make choices, right? Because the way I think about it is you can't prioritize what's not known. And we
Yeah,
tend to
makes
kind of
sense.
have things scattered, either because we don't have systems or because there's just stuff in our head that we're not letting ourselves say or put down about like what we want. There's things that are always on our minds that we don't get out of our heads. So when we put it all in one place, we can start to go, oh yeah, like the podcast, like I haven't like done something with that in a while or whatever it might be, right? Like, oh yeah, the trip that I keep saying
Yeah,
I
I
want to
wanted to
take.
take up a hobby. I wanted to read more
Yeah.
books. So, I mean, there are
Yeah, or I'm
endless
like,
things.
I haven't had my mammogram or whatever it could like it can be
Hmm.
all those things that are like on our minds that we don't let ourselves get off our minds and put in front of us. And sometimes just doing that makes it really clear about whether or not we want to make progress on them or not. Yeah, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, wait, never mind. Like when I look at it compared to everything else, like that's not anything I actually care about. And then other times it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's like this like long neglected thing that needs to get dusted off and put in front of us. And now we can put it up against everything else and go, I don't know, do I want to make progress on that thing? Like, what would that look like? Just to take one little step and see how that
Hmm.
feels instead of just perseverating on it all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. You said before you went through this process yourself. Do you remember one or two things that you like crossed from the list that you're not doing anymore that
Yeah.
you've done before to kind of like numb out by checking boxes?
Yeah. I mean, it was sometimes it was like I was adding things I already did, right? Like I think there's a lot of us out there that do. If anybody else is a
I
list
love this.
maker,
Yeah, yeah,
you
no
know, like
shame.
you add
Yeah.
things that you already did so you can cross it off. So there's those kinds of things, but it's also kind of just like, is it really like essential that I'm doing like it'd be doing stuff for people that they didn't ask for? I was just like, I think they need this. Like for my husband at the time, I would like do
Mm.
stuff that he didn't appreciate. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why don't we just have a conversation about what he might appreciate and how I can support him, right? So there was a lot of um
Mm.
like hustling to be wanted and needed and liked and all this kind of stuff, or like things that I thought I should do, like, oh, I should host this thing. I'm like, no, I shouldn't. I don't even want to host that thing. Like I can just like send a gift. I don't have, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
just the things where you're just like, why? Why am I doing that?
Hmm.
Social media. So for me, like now, especially my business, I'm like, social media is not really how I get clients. I
Yeah.
have an Instagram account. I will share my podcast there to make sure everybody knows about new episodes. If I feel like posting, I will, but it's not part of like my actual marketing plan,
Hmm.
right? Like doing this is more a part of my marketing plan.
Yeah.
Getting to talk with other people and have real authentic conversations is way better for me. This is way more enjoyable for me than to try to dream up a bunch of social media posts, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just this stuff where you start to go like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. Why is this on here?
That's really, yeah. I remember I went through that through a similar period myself, and it was really empowering to ask, to be brutally honest and be like, why is this on the list? Like,
Mhm.
why do I think I should do this? And
Yeah.
it was a lot of stuff on it as well for for my family. And I'm like, no,
Mhm.
I don't think, I mean, I'm not even sure if this should be done. Like, and some stuff is just kind of like societally expected, like bringing when your kid has a birthday, bringing cake to preschool. I'm like, you know what? They're just as fine with like I don't know, a slice of like brioche, a brioche and like I don't know, piece of chocolate. So there you
Yeah.
go. Right? Like I mean,
Well, no, it was like my book club. We would every year do this cookie party, and I hosted it every year for until I got divorced. And I was like, somebody needs to host it this year. I can't do it. And a couple years in a row, I was like, bake cookies for the cookie party, like for the when I was no longer hosting it. Because I like hosting stuff, but I was like, bake cookies for the cookie party, bake cookies for the cookie party. It's coming up, it's coming up. And I kept skipping over it every day. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going through a freaking divorce right now. I'm gonna buy cookies, or actually, I'm gonna show up empty-handed. Like I can do those things. And it was really funny because I showed up with like store-bought cookies and everybody was like, whoa, are you okay? And I'm like,
ah,
no, I'm not okay. The
yeah,
divorce sucks, especially during the holidays. So here's your freaking store-bought cookies that I grabbed on my way.
yeah, deal with it.
Yeah. And they were like, we're so glad you're here. Right. It's like, But they just were like so used to be doing this other thing
Mhm.
that they're like, "Hi, you okay, hun?" I'm like, "No, do I look okay? I'm not okay."
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? It I remember I also stopped kind of like caretaking of my family because I'm like, no, I don't want to like be always just the one who has to host Christmas because fuck that. No, it's so
Yeah.
much work. Um and it was really interesting, right? Everyone was like so taken aback and like, "Oh, but why and what now?" And it was really like almost kind of cross with me because
Mhm.
it just has always been this way,
Mhm.
right? Until I said, no, you know what? I actually have enough now. Thanks.
Yeah.
And it's really tough. Like it led to really tough conversations and also like strained relationships because
Mhm.
then, I mean, boomer parents do not get it at all.
Well, that I think that is a thing. I think traditions are a thing. They're a thing that like get in the way of like what we really want. And it's like
Mm,
we can create new traditions. We can shift them a little bit. Like we went from always having Christmas in the eastern part of our state. I live in Washington state. And the majority of, the elders lived over there. And so we would go over there for Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff. And at some point, my aunt just couldn't host anymore, right? Are we really going to make her keep hosting when, she's like, she seriously had a part of her, a partial leg amputation. Like, we're really going to make her host? No, we're not going to
no,
make her host.
no.
We got it. And everybody got that. But like at the same time, it took a major life event
Yeah.
to allow I
A
guess
grown
technically
ass woman to be like, no.
and elderly woman, like
Yeah.
somebody's like that could be like, yeah, like your kids don't have to come try to help you put all this together. They're under strain too. Like we can come up with something different. And so I think sometimes it is just like getting everything in front of you is one thing, but then pausing on a regular basis to reflect, to be able to say like, what went well this month? What didn't go so well this month? What did I learn from that? And who do I want to be next month?
Mm,
We're not talking at the task level. We're just like taking a pause every once in a while to remind ourselves like who do I want to be in this world, because I think we talked about this when we first met, was the this whole idea of like life is short and we don't know where it's going to go, and I don't know for sure, like no matter how spiritual you are, like I just don't know for sure like what comes after this life.
yeah.
It could be nothing, it could be everything. I don't know. All I know is this one.
Yeah.
So I want it to be good. It's not always going to be
Yeah.
happy and
You also
joyful
don't know the
because shit
future, like
happens.
what's happened
Yeah.
next day, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. All you
Yeah.
know is the present moment.
Yeah, so it's like who do I wanna be right now? How do I wanna act? How do I wanna show
How
up?
do I want to
And
feel right now?
yeah,
Mm.
exactly, and that has a lot to do with how we're spending our time. Like, I think James Clear talked about it, like, the identity is your continued beingness, and it's
Hmm.
like, who are you being? That is your identity, so we get to choose our identity all the time, and it's not always easy because we that means, like, how do we react to crappy stuff that goes on, right? But,
Yeah.
like, we get
No
we
one
get to
said
make
it's easy.
so yeah, we get to make so many choices, so many more
Mm.
choices than we allow ourselves to believe sometimes, because
Yeah.
the choices can be really hard, because they can, like you said, lead to hard conversations and strained relationships and whatnot. But to
Yeah.
me, all of this is productivity, right? All of this is like what matters most to me and
Mm.
how am I going to progress that.
Yeah. And it's freeing up time, right? You setting boundaries or saying no is protecting time for what matters most to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if this is a growing up with with a women identity or not, but I feel setting boundaries and saying no is especially hard for us. Do you have any practical tips that you like share with your clients on like saying setting boundaries? Or you're like, no, it's the blind leading the blind.
It can be sometimes. I'll tell you what. No, my wife and I were just talking about this last night. She needed to set some boundaries
Mm.
with one of her. So she's a general contractor, and so being a queer female general contractor, somewhat stereotypical, I suppose, in some
That's
ways, but
very
also
interesting.
yeah, but also a struggle in other ways
Yeah.
because you're working largely with to be honest, in at least in our space, a lot of straight white cisgendered men, right? So it's just
Mm.
like it's just different. And so really what has been most helpful for me about boundaries, and what I talk about a lot with my community, my clients, is that that boundaries are something that you do, that I can't expect you, the other person, to uphold my boundaries. I have to uphold my boundaries. And so with my wife yesterday, she had set a boundary in the past about who does what, like who does finished work versus, lower skilled work. And
Yeah.
she has some youngsters on the team, and then she has these very skilled people. And the skilled people kept trying to have the youngsters do stuff they don't know how to do. And she had said it multiple times and it still was happening. And she just was like, had to have like a face-to-face talk about it. Like, for real, this cannot happen anymore, or else we cannot work together. Right. Like, it's a
Mm-hmm.
hard conversation to have, but it was up to her to uphold the boundary. You can't state a boundary and expect everybody to take the action for you. You have to state the boundary and you see how they respond. And then you uphold the boundary and you say, no, that's not okay. No, I asked for this. Right. And so it's not like there's not any quick or easy advice on it. It is like you have to be willing to like state boundaries that you're really going to uphold. Like, just don't say it if you're not going to uphold it, because then
Yeah,
you're creating
rather
a
like
pattern of
have
not
just a
doing it.
few that really matter to you,
Yes.
then mm.
Which is kind of like child rearing, right? Like, you
Oh
can't say,
God, yes.
like, it's like you got to choose your battles, right? That extends to like every relationship, right? Like, it's like you can't have
Yeah.
like,
We want to win a war. We don't care about the battles. We want to
yeah,
win the war.
yeah. Exactly. So like, what's worth going to war for? Like, and that,
Mm.
I think that goes though back to like, what are your values? Like,
Yeah.
what do you really care about? What are the true violations? And a lot of times, people kind of think of values as very like fluffy, like aspirational things. But it's like, the way I say to uncover boundaries is like, what pisses you off? Or excuse me, values. What pisses you off? Because that's a values violation. And when
Mhm.
that's like, to me, like people not returning their shopping cart when they're perfectly able-bodied, that pisses
Mm.
me off when they don't return their shopping cart. And
Yeah.
because to me, that's like, you're not being thoughtful. Like,
Mm.
thoughtfulness and thoughtfulness of impact on others is really important to me. It's a value I hold dearly.
Yeah.
And so I don't care if you're running late. Like, just put the shopping cart back. Don't leave
Mm.
it in the middle of the parking lot, which sounds so silly, but that was something where I was like, oh, what is this really about?
Yeah.
So and it's not like I'm going to go confront somebody. Like, that's not the war I'm trying to win, but it points
Mm.
to how I expect other people to treat each other when they're going to be part of whatever it is I'm doing. Like,
Mm.
I will speak up about stuff, not
Yeah.
shopping carts. I'll just
No,
grab the
but
shopping
it's
cart
so
and put it
interesting
away.
that you brought up shopping carts because I remember we we used shopping carts as an analogy back in my sociology studies. It's kind of like it says a lot about how you approach personal responsibility and consideration for others, right? Like this, even if it's slightly inconvenient to return your cart, like it's just demonstrate a willingness to be considerate, like
Yeah.
of the collective good rather than just like your individual me. And
Hmm.
it's just like you leaving it wherever, lack of concern, like you don't care if someone else has to like clean up after you. So
Yep.
I totally get the shopping cart.
Yeah. And it's like, but that's where we can see like, what are the boundaries worth setting?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to approach a stranger about a shopping cart, but I will say something if my
You,
wife were
sir,
to do
put your
it.
oh
Yeah. If my wife was like, just left the shop, I was like, dude, no, come on. Like,
yeah.
what are you doing? Put that back.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, I'm taking it back. And she's like, but we're like, I don't care. I'm taking it back. This is
Yeah.
rude. Right. She
Yeah.
doesn't do it. But like, I guess that's just like the example. Like, you have to think about, who am I setting the boundaries with, and what are the things that really matter that
Mm.
I'm willing to have the hard conversation. What my wife has said about us is like, we don't we don't always get it right, but we do the right thing even when it's a hard thing. Like, we get there eventually. And sometimes it is having the hard conversations, and it
Ooh,
sucks.
it's ooh, yes. A lot of times it's having the hard conversations, right? Like especially when you realize you've been doing stuff for your partner that you're like, I don't actually want to do this anymore. It will be a hard conversation in most cases, right?
Mhm.
Because it made someone's life easier and now not.
Mhm. No, my wife and I had a conversation about, I mean, because part of it too is like, she was kind of like a bachelorette, I guess, the whole, for most of her life. she was in relationships, but always felt very independent. Whereas I was always partnered up and very quickly took on all the expectations of being like a suburban housewife, kind of thing. Like where I was like, did all the things and, he was a breadwinner, even though I had my own business as well and like all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she and I came together, it was kind of easy for me to fall into my old ways and then be resentful when really I needed to have a conversation and be like, dude, like, I'll do laundry, you do dishes. Like, I can't do both. And she's like, oh my God, of course. I'm like, great. All right, we've got that now. And so if I do dishes, she's like, babe, that's my job. I'm like, I know, but sometimes I'm still gonna like, I'm waiting for food to heat up in the microwave. I can unload a dishwasher. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's just like, but just having those, even just those like those little simple things where it's like, I don't have time to take care of the entire household. Neither one of us does. So what are you going to do? What am I going to do?
Mm. There's such an important point that you're bringing up, resentment, right? Because
Mm.
so many of us are like doing, swallowing it up, bottling it up, bottling it down. And at one point, it's just gonna like, blah, like erupt into this big, like, resentment volcano. And all the stuff comes up that you've been doing for years and years and years. And your partner looks at you and goes like, what happened now?
You're
And
like, why didn't you say something?
yeah, why didn't you
Right.
like say something like three
Yeah.
years ago when like
Yeah.
whatever, I never asked you to do this. Like it's really, yeah. And it's just such a good reminder because I'm sometimes always like, I was really guilty of this, of like doing something and then like, doesn't he see that I'm doing this now and it fucking pisses me off and he lets me do this? And he's like
Totally.
totally chilling on the couch and I'm like quietly resenting the shit out of him.
Uh-huh.
Been there, done that. Very proud moments.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, I still do it. Like we all like this is like I feel like I'm always learning, I'm always growing, I'm never going to be done. Like I seriously had somebody tell me when I was going when like I've been a coach for 15 years and I enlisted in life coach training. And so they tell you to like send this letter out to your friends and family to let them know you're going to become a coach because then they'll know about your business, right? And this person, I was like a friend of a friend. I ran into her at a social event and she was just like, oh, I didn't get that letter, but I heard about it because I didn't have her address. I didn't know her that well, right? And I was like, oh yeah. She's like, so life coach, huh? You must think you're perfect.
Mm.
I was just like, what? And she's like, well, you must think you're perfect if you're going to help everybody else live their life. Yeah, I was like, oh my God. Like, no, I was like, I like figuring it out. I just like figuring it out and I like helping other people figure it out. That's all. And I think we're always figuring it out and we're never going to get it right all the time. And so to me, that's a major part of productivity too, is like running experiments, like having a
Mm.
hypothesis and trying something, right? Not having this again, perseverating in your brain about something and thinking about all the reasons it's not going to work. That's not a real experiment, right? That's just like doom and
Yeah.
gloom. Like you have a hypothesis about something in your life or your business or whatever, like how could you try it out a little bit and find out, right? And so I think that sometimes we can get in like this automatic mode of like you said, like just doing things around the house that nobody seems to appreciate and they're sitting on their ass or whatever. And it's like, or I could just not do it, or I could have a conversation about it, or I could
Or if I
like
have the means,
try
I
an
could like
experiment.
outsource it or
Yeah.
whatever. Mm.
Yeah. I could have a conversation with my partner and say, hey, babe, what do you think about allocating some money to have somebody mow the lawn? What do you think about allocating some money to having somebody clean for us, even if it was just once a month, right? So it's like, but that like we get to like try something and the experiments can be something that are ongoing or it can be just one conversation, right? And
Mm.
see where it goes. And it's funny how often I help people have conversations. I don't always get it right in my life, but for some reason I'm good at going, well, what if it was something like this? And they're like, whoa, what did you just say? Can you say that again? I'm like, no, that was magic. It came out of my mouth. I don't know what I
Yeah.
said, but
Yeah, I know. I
but
know.
I can
Mm.
totally screw it up with my wife, but
You're
like I
you're
can,
too attached. That's what happens.
yeah,
But
but I can hear it for other people, whether
mm-hmm.
it's them with their employees, they're with their boss, or in their personal life. It's just like sounds like you need to have a conversation. I think more often than not, we need to have more conversations than we're having,
Mm.
especially considering, text, email, Slack, like all the ways that we can be actually disconnected and think we're communicating, that sometimes we actually need to have a voice to voice conversation.
So true. Yeah, sometimes modern technology is not really helping us in
Yeah.
that regard at all.
And don't get me wrong, I hate having to get on the phone.
Yeah,
I hate having to make a phone call,
I'm
like
like
all of that stuff.
I'm a I don't know, I'm of this generation where I'm like, oh, I don't know this number. I'm not gonna pick it up.
Me too. Me too. 100.
Like, no,
And I'm a
whoa.
business owner. Like
I
I
know, me
should,
too.
quote unquote, I should pick it up, right?
No.
I'm like,
If you
nope, I
want to
don't know who
work with
you
me and
are.
you call me, we're not gonna end up working together. I'm sorry.
Totally. Email me, please. Thank you.
Or make me a WhatsApp or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't care. But yeah, please do not call me.
totally.
I feel we have to debunk a myth here. And you probably hear it a lot too. We've talked about, okay, we gotta reframe productivity as making progress and
Yeah.
really like looking at what matters most to us. And I feel like, okay, we gotta debunk one big elephant in the room is the whole, but Jen, but Elise, I don't have time. Like, do you
Yeah.
really? What's your take on this myth? Is it
Well,
a myth? Is it not? Like, what's your take?
I actually think it's kind of not a myth in a way. Here's what I mean. I I think people expect me to say, you have as much time, you have time, like you get to do whatever you want with your time, which is true. You do get to do whatever you want with your time. But we don't have time to do it all. So you're right. You don't have time. You don't have time to do it all. You only have this much time. Like, because you made these commitments already that you are either willing to alter or you're committing to. And so here's how much time you have. What do you want to do with it? Because what I see, and I'm not kidding, like I will, some people, because I see people's calendars, I see their to-do lists, I see all the shit, right? So I will see somebody in back-to-back meetings all day long. Like seriously, not a break. I'm like, when do you pee? When do you eat? Right? Back-to-back meetings all day long. And then 20 items on their to-do list, one of which is like writing a proposal that's going to take more than an hour. I'm just like, in what world do you think you have time today to do 20 things? You're in meetings back to back. You don't have time for any biological support for yourself, right? In what world do you think this happens? And so that's where it's like, you're right. You don't have time. With how you're doing things right now, you don't have time.
Mm.
And so it's that, and so that's to me about having like these systems in place that you can say, and not just the systems. Like to me, I think of systems as like there's the apps, but there's also how do I engage with these things? How do I put things in front of me in a way where I'm making choices and that I feel good about what's not getting done so that you can say, yeah, I don't have time. And therefore I'm not doing these things. And I made that a conscious choice instead of just feeling like crap at the end of the day because all 20 things didn't get done.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really good point. Like always have a choice to get out of commitments. And I say this in probably the most brutal way possible. I mean, having a kid is a commitment, but you could also get
Mhm.
out of this commitment if you like want to.
Mhm.
Um, not to say you should or anything, but I mean it's a choice that you stay committed to your child.
Yeah, like,
Um,
yeah, are you going to be like like how committed are you going to be? What does that look like? And what does
yeah.
that mean for your time? And stop expecting, especially at different stages of their lives, like stop expecting so much of yourself right now then, right?
Mm.
Like if you want to be that present, like if you want to be like, however
Yeah,
present
if you
you want
want
to
to be that
be,
kind of parent, that type of parent you've chosen for yourself.
yeah. Then what does that mean for the reality of your time?
Yeah.
And how do you scale back other things? I heard Brene Brown talking about this the other day. It's a clip that's circulating a lot right now. And it's she talked about being like, are we a kid family? Like that prioritizes our kids, a family that prioritizes our relationship, or are we like a family that prioritizes our family? And they prioritize their family, which means they make decisions about not doing things sometimes. Like we're both burnt out, this is happening.
Yeah.
Let's see if, our kid is okay with skipping water polo practice today. Right?
Yeah.
Like just those things, because there's so much cultural pressure on parents to have their kids in all these activities. It's like, it's okay. Like, I get like they made a commitment and you don't want to let people down and you cannot always make it to everything. And it's
Yeah.
okay. to say no. I think what's hard about the time thing is that people try to make changes to like how they're doing things in their schedule, and they forget that it takes a long time for that to shake out because you've already made these
Mm.
commitments. And
Mhm.
unless you're willing to just cancel all of these commitments, it's going to take time for your changes and boundaries
Like
to shake out.
readjust and yeah.
Yeah, because it could take a
Mm.
couple weeks because of all the meetings that are already on your calendar, for example, or it's so I had a client, well, I support teams a lot. And so this is a team member that his boss was upset that he wasn't getting his time logged, which she needs in order to bill the clients and to report back to the client, right? And he wasn't getting it done. And we looked at his calendar and he was somebody that was seriously back to back to back. I'm like, dude, when do you eat lunch? And he's like, oh, I'm like, so you're not eating lunch, or you're like trying to scarf down lunch in
Mhm.
1 minute, like not healthy, right? I was like, but you also you're never giving yourself a break to like pivot from one meeting to the next. Therefore, you're never logging your time. You're never sending the emails. You're constantly behind. And so all we did was just add what we called closing duties. It's like at a restaurant, if you don't do closing duties, then the opening shift is going to be pissed at you, right? So it's like you got to do the closing duties so but in this case, like you
To
are the
prepare
next
for
shift.
what's next. Yeah. To prepare
Yeah,
for the
you
next
are the
shift.
next shift. So your
Yeah. You
next
gotta pee, you gotta have your water, vitamins,
yeah,
whatever, so you're ready for your next shift.
yeah, future you is going to be pissed at you if you don't give
Mhm.
yourself time between meetings to take care of yourself, to send the recap, and to log your hours, right?
Mm.
That's all he did was just add a little buffer time between meetings so that he could do that. His boss is happier, he's happier, like, but it took weeks for that to shake out because he did not want to move any of the meetings that were already booked. And I was like, that's fine. That's your choice, but you have to know you're not going to get relief for at least a couple weeks. That means you're going to
Yeah.
have to work longer hours to get all the emails sent and the hours logged. So you need to set expectations with your boss accordingly, and
Yeah,
that's
and maybe
okay.
your partner or your I don't know,
Yeah.
your bowling club, whatever, that you won't be around for like a week
Yeah.
or two
And
or
that's okay if it's a conscious choice, but it hadn't been a conscious choice, right?
yeah.
So he'd survived those 2 weeks and now he's getting to thrive instead of just survive all the time, right?
Mm.
So the
Yeah,
time
it's
stuff is hard because it takes time for like new boundaries, new schedules, these experiments. It takes time for things to shake out. So it's like you've got to be patient, stick to it, and then make adjustments. But you usually aren't going to scrap the thing altogether. Be like, never mind, I'm not going to have any boundaries anymore. Never mind, I'm just going to be booked all the time, right? Never mind, I'm going to expect too much of myself for the rest of my life. It's
yeah.
like, okay, or you could try something different.
But I'm like, but we always want to have a quick win. Right? We always need a quick win, right? It's the same when you're I don't know dieting and the weight doesn't go off. It doesn't go off.
Oh
You're like,
gosh, yes.
ugh! Or you're working out and you're running and you're still not able to run your what I don't know 10K under whatever kind of minutes you're supposed to run it. Not a runner. Um, is there something like a quick win? Like,
No.
or,
I know.
thank you
I'm
very
sorry,
much for
guys.
joining me on the CD Grab podcast.
I know. But that's why I wanted like Scenic Route is a perfect title. So my podcast is called The Productivity Shift. The Productivity Shift is like what I call like my 3-word rebellion. It's not exactly a rallying cry to be like, we're gonna shift, but that's how it works. Like all of
No,
these
it's
things.
not. We
I
need to work on
know.
that market. We need a better
But
rally cry.
I know. And actually I am looking at altering a little bit, but I also don't want to lie to people, right? Like I also want to be like, listen, like this stuff takes time to shake out. Like there is no quick fix in all of this. All of it. And so even with I originally had a program that was like, it's this 6-week, 6-module course, and you learn how to do all this stuff. It's like, yeah, they could learn all that in 6 weeks. I could teach it to them in
It
like
doesn't manifest in their lives within 6 weeks.
no. And your life changes and your dreams change. Like your dreams definitely change as you get these systems in place because you're like, oh, I'm actually going to pursue this dream now, right? Like all these things start shifting around. And so it's like everything's going to just constantly be changing. So you're constantly going to be adapting and changing how you're doing your boundaries and changing how you're doing your
Yeah.
calendar. You got to stay in it. This isn't a one and done because that's the same thing with weight loss. Like you can find ways to shortcut your weight loss, but is it going to last? And is it going to be
Is it
like,
fun?
yeah, are you going to be happy in it?
Yeah.
Like, I've recently chosen to just not even worry about it anymore. Like this past year, I've been like, I am never going to measure or count or weigh anything ever again. I absolutely refuse. I'm done with it. And we'll see where my body goes, but I'm done. I'm done with it. If I need to buy bigger clothes, I will buy bigger clothes, but I am done with this
Mm.
because it wasn't sustainable for me. It
Mm.
didn't feel good. It was a complete preoccupation. Whereas when I'm having to stick it out, right, with any of my experiments that I'm running, it's because I am making progress on stuff I want to make progress on, right? It's like,
Mm.
to me, it's worth it. But that doesn't mean you don't take breaks from it. That doesn't mean that you're like a slave to a to-do list for the rest of your life.
Mm.
The only
So you
thing the
got to
to-do
strike a
list,
balance between what matters most and while you're still like living your life and
yeah.
enjoying it.
Yeah. And so, well, so to me, like the to-do list and your calendar, like that just says what you wanted. Every day you get to decide if you're going to do it. Like
Mm.
all that is, the way I always talk about it, it sounds kind of weird, but like that's your past self telling your today self what you said, what you wanted. Back then, 4 weeks
Mm.
ago, you
Mm-hmm.
wanted this to show up for you on this day. And now you get to decide if you're going to do it. And if it was a promise you made to somebody else, you decide if you're going to keep that promise. If it's a promise you made to yourself, you're going to decide if you keep that promise. And it's okay to break promises, right? It's like, it's not great, but if it's okay if you need to, right? Like, it's okay to say, like, I'm not going to actually do this today because it wasn't really a promise. I just wanted it in front of me again today.
Mm.
Like, there's a difference between a commitment and a reminder, and
Yeah.
your system can hold both. And it's just showing you both so you can make choices.
Mm.
That's all. Like, that's all it has to be about. It doesn't have to be about this is on my to-do list, so I must do it all. It's like, no, this is what my past self thought I wanted in front of me again today.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do? And what am I
Mm.
going to not do? Like, what am I going to say? I always say like, I keep saying all that. I'm like, I'm so weird. I am. I have like these
Welcome to
weird
the
wants.
club. You can be VP.
Yeah. Yes. I have these weird wants for people. Like, I want you to feel just as good about what you're not doing as you are about what you are getting done. Right. So feel good about
Oh,
what's not getting
yes. I
done.
love this. Yes.
Right? Because it's a choice. But when
Yeah.
stuff is falling through the cracks, when everything is scattered and we're just kind of responding and or reacting to everything and we're in this whirlwind, a bunch of shit isn't getting done and we're freaked out and we've got anxiety and we're not even, it's because we don't know what's not getting done. So get it known and make choices about what's not getting done and and you can feel good about that
Yeah.
because you're saying, I chose this, I chose not this, and I chose this today.
This is, yeah, I love this. And it feels very much empowering to be like, no, actually, for whatever reason, I chose this and I'm going to
Yeah.
stick with it, or I'm not going to stick with it, but it's my choice. And like, come hell or high water, I'm going to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love this. Yes. And that you should feel as good about not doing something as you should feel about doing something. Ooh, this is really good. I love it.
Okay.
Oh, it's okay. I have one more question before we're like, okay, give us the hack. um, so I can like write like a very good like intro hook so people like listening the entire episode for the one
Yeah.
hack.
Listen to the end.
That's why I'm shit at marketing, because I'm not doing these things. Um, no, but sometimes we have things that are taking a bit longer,
Mm,
like goals that we want, like feeling healthier, for example, or
mhm,
like setting up a podcast, whatever it may be, right? And it just take longer than just being one task on a to-do list. I mean, if you
mhm.
write setting up a podcast on your to-do list, you're gonna fail
Yes.
miserably.
Yes.
So I mean, seen this movie, know how it ends. So if we have like these big monumental tasks ahead of us, how how do you measure progress
Yeah.
beyond like checking tasks off? Like, what's your take? What's your tip?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it does come back to tasks, and this is like leaning into we're again getting close to a hack again. Like when something is big, there's two different approaches to take. One is that you take it one step at a time. Like no matter what, you have to take it one step at a
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of
Anyway.
how do you structure that for
Mm.
yourself and how you think about it. So for some folks, thinking about the whole big thing is a little scary, right? And they're like, if I think about all the steps it's going to take, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna falter and like default. No.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but I could take the next step. And
Mm-hmm.
the problem is it's hard because, and I do this with people every single day, is that it's hard to think of just the next step. We're usually thinking like 3 or 4 steps ahead, not like what's just the next step. And so the way I phrase it, I call it the creepy question is like, if I busted into your office and I saw you making progress on this thing, and we'll just say starting a podcast as an example, and I saw you making progress on start the podcast, what would I actually see you doing? So not like, what would you do, but what could somebody walk in and observe you physically doing? Would you be like on the podcast app, like on the Apple Podcast app, like researching podcasts that on the topic that you're doing to see what your competition
recording an
is?
intro with your mic in front of you, or
Exactly. Are you researching microphones even? Are you like looking for somebody to help you start your podcast? But like, what would be the very next thing I would like catch you in the act of doing? And so when they have to think of something that's actually physical and visible, they start to zero in on what the next action actually is. So if you're the type of person that gets overwhelmed by the grandness of a project or the size of a project, you take it down to the next action and just try that step and see how it feels, because then other steps start falling and you just keep doing it. You keep next stepping it. And you can track that. You can be like, I took this step, and like have like a little journal to say like, I did this step, and know that you made progress. For other folks though, they have all the steps in their head that they know need to happen, and they need to get them out of their heads. They need to be like, oh, let me brain dump everything I think needs to happen and get it out of my head and into my system. And don't put due dates on all of it, because you don't know for sure how this is going to go, but you think it might go this way. But identify, just like with the other person, identify the next thing that needs to happen. What is that next thing that I could walk in and see you doing to make progress on this list that you just brain dumped?
or just sticky
And
notes
just
and kind of like rearrange them in order.
but just worry about the next thing, but get it all out of your head. And sometimes you're not going to know which person you are, so you just got to try one and see what happens. But a lot of people will be like in their systems are like, should I add a bunch of subtasks to this project? And I'm like, I don't know, is it going to help you? Like, is it like, are you like thinking about it all the time? They're like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, we'll get them all out of there then. Put them all in there, pick your next action. And then when you're done with that, pick the next one, right? And if they're not that person, right, they're not thinking about all the steps, then we do the opposite. We're like, no matter what, just pick the next action. And then we'll figure out the step 2 together, right? And go from there.
I love the visualization exercise. And it just like had this idea of like, you know what? Next time I'm gonna do like a momentum, like a monster big project. I'm gonna write like a movie script.
Ooh,
you know, like
yeah,
as you're like the director and you need to know what's gonna happen next, right?
yes.
I don't know. Keanu Reeves is like researching microphones for a podcast. You know, like
yeah, he walks in and sits at his desk.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like I've really gotta write a movie script.
Uh-huh.
And then kind of like visualize it. Is this weird?
Yeah.
Sure, right?
No,
like, but
no,
I'm
because
like,
it's like
I'm gonna write a movie script.
it's like you said with the Post-its, like, or a whiteboard, right? Like sometimes we like more often than not, we just need to get things out of our heads. We do so much thinking. It's like, just get it out of your head and in front of you and engage with it. And sometimes pen and paper or whiteboard or Post-its is enough. Other times it's like having a conversation with somebody to talk it through. Even if you prefer introversion, you still need to get things out of your head in some way, shape, or form. So get it out of your head and onto paper so that you can engage with it. And then we can figure out how to get it into your system in a way that's actually going to support you and not overwhelm you.
Yeah, I feel this is very good advice, because I know a lot of you listening are like same as me, like we're like in our heads people, and like high achievers and like super smart people who are like, I can figure this out all in my head. Like, no baby, you cannot.
Yeah. That is a problem. We are too, like, I seriously, that's what I'm saying, like, y'all are too smart. Like, you know what needs to happen. And so you're trying to start at step 5. Like, what for me, it was like, for the longest time, I had like make dentist appointment on my to-do list. I didn't have a dentist. I had moved and I didn't have a dentist. How the F am I going to make a dentist appointment? So my next action wasn't make dentist appointment. I didn't have a dentist to call. Yeah. But even find
check
dentist.
Yelp for dentist reviews.
There you go, right? Or post to the local Facebook group to see who their favorite dentist is, or ask your neighbor but it has to be something I could, like, you could see me walk over to Dan across the street and be like, hey, yo, Dan, like, what
I can write in movie director script. Elise walks over to neighbor, knocks on the door.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can make it really fun and exciting. Like the rooster crowed and this happened. And
oh, sure. She wears a fancy dress.
Yes. For some reason, she's in a ball gown. Like, who cares? Make it fun.
I already see this. Like, oh, sorry, babe. I had to get a credit card. I needed some new dresses for like my next like big project video script. I scripted in that I was wearing this fancy dress, so I mean, I had to.
I can't help it. I can't help
It's in the script. I mean, if
it.
it's in
Yeah,
the script, right?
we got to do it.
We're gonna do it. Oh, I love this. Okay, so Elise, if anyone listening here feels like, oh, I desperately need Elise to help me get my shit together productively, where can people find you? Where do you hang out online?
Yeah.
Tell us.
So you can find me on Instagram at the productivity shift. Yes, shift, not a rallying cry. We're just making shifts here, people. So the productivity shift. And you can always DM me there and ask me questions, find the latest episode of my podcast, all that kind of stuff.
Perfect. And I always have one last question before I let people go. What book are you currently reading, or what audiobook are you currently listening to?
Oh gosh. Okay. So audiobook, I'm listening to IFS, which is it's called No Bad Parts. It's about internal family systems. It's really fascinating, like therapeutic work that I find it's kind of like Inside Out, that movie Inside Out about all the
Oh,
different
I love
feelings.
it. But
Yeah,
the sequel was also so good.
it was so good. And so they actually were advisors on those movies. The IFS
Oh,
community were
wow.
advisors on
Yeah.
those communities. And so it's about looking at the different parts that are inside of us and how they step forward and pull back and how they show up and lead your
Interesting.
behavior. So that's my nonfiction. And then an actual book that I can hold and read. I'm reading one called, I think it's called Big Swiss. It's a very strange, edgy, uh, I don't know what novel. It's very interesting. I think it's called The Big Swiss. It is
There is a book
no,
called Big Swiss by Jen Began.
yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, and so it's about a woman who transcribes sex therapy um conversations for a therapist, and then but she lives in a small town and she keeps running into the people. She's basically keeps running into the therapist clients because she knows their
Oh.
voices. So it's her engaging in this world where she knows all these people's secrets, and she runs into them
Oh.
in the real world. So it's very like different and weird and
Okay.
not a straightforward protagonist, a very
Okay, so it's
complicated
kind of like
protagonist.
dark, fun sex
Yeah.
comedy.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
It's
okay.
like it's definitely like kind of like
Getting the vibe.
subversive humor. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't what I
Yeah,
was
it's
expecting,
going
and I'm
on my
really having
list. It's
fun.
going on
Okay,
my list. I'm
okay.
just super confused. As I am Swiss, I am super confused what Big Swiss is. I'm like,
You'll
what?
find out. You'll find
Okay.
out. I don't want to tell
And
you. You'll find out.
spoiler. Damn.
You'll find out
Okay.
like 4 chapters or 5 chapters in,
Okay, fair enough.
I
Okay.
think. Maybe even sooner. Maybe even sooner.
Okay. So, if you we're gonna link all of this in the show notes. As you know, the books also go up in a Scenic Route library. Whenever you need your next read, you can go online and have a look. And you and I, dear listener, we will find out together why is it called Big Swiss, because I really have no fucking idea. So Elise, thank you so much for being on a Scenic Road with me and sharing all your knowledge with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.